Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome one and all to the Week 11 edition of the Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Drake. You can find me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. We got a fun one this week. A good buddy of mine I've been talking to in the industry for years. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person out at the Fantasy Football Expo and exchanging some pleasantries and some bourbon on the side. It's my good buddy, Joe Dolan of fantasypoints.com. Welcome to the hustle, Joe. How's it going, bud?
It's good to be back, Drake. We've been talking about doing this for a while, we had to find the right moment. This is the right moment right now. It is, of course, pitch black outside because I love my I'm so self-conscious about my lighting right now. Have you ever noticed that, like, the people, have you been on the Fantasy Pros pod?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I have with Erickson and Pisapia. They look amazing. I look like I'm in a bunker.
So I did it a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago at this point. What a month. Who gives a shit? A couple months ago, I did it with Pisapia and Debro. And let me tell you something. Those commenters are mean, man.
Wait, people on the internet are assholes? No way.
I'm always self-conscious because first and foremost, I never realized that I have very angry eyebrows until I was on that. And some guy called me Rash Boy because my lighting, I guess, highlights my rosacea. Oh, thanks. Geez. Yeah, that made me feel real good about myself. I've learned not to take it personally, but I guess I have very expressive eyebrows. And the only time I've ever heard that was on that comment section. Don't read the comments, folks. There's a piece of life advice. But anyway, my lighting though during the day is natural light, and it's great. I'm right up against the window. I love that. During the nighttime though, I'm relying on. I really need to improve this setup. By the way, Drake, that's your job. It's your job to help me improve.
Well, I've got 3 lights on me now, and it's still way too dark. I want to look like Erickson and be sitting on the sun. My old pal, my old co-host at SiriusXM, Andrew Erickson. Shout out to him.
Well, that's bad for me too, by the way, because I sweat like a pig. So, me sitting on the sun would not be good for anybody.
I want to ask you this because you host the Game Day show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I actually follow you on Sunday nights. I'm on 7 to 9. You're on 1 to 7. Yeah. So you do 6 hours. And I don't know if anybody ever really talks to you about this show, but it's fascinating. It's Radio Red Zone, essentially. Yes. So you and Paul Kelly do the show this year. I got to know. I want to know the setup, the TVs, the food, the bathroom breaks. How does it all go down?
Okay, so let's start with the setups. Okay, let me tilt this. Okay, couple of TVs. There's some glass cleaner. I actually did my TVs today. I got a couple of TVs. I've got my laptop where I have my laptop's over here. Okay, let's see here. I got my laptop.
If you're watching on the YouTube channel, Joe is giving us a whole tour of his attic here.
And my my iMac is a 24-inch iMac. And I also have that for games. So I have basically 4 TVs going. My laptop's going for Twitter. There's one you can't see back there, TV. This is a 42-inch. We got a 55-inch. I have my 24-inch iMac that's going. And normally now, if you watch my my morning show or my podcast, normally my dogs occupy this space right here. But the seat closest to me here with the armrest, that is my game day seat.
And you have a headset on, and you're just watching Red Zone and different games.
I got the Red Zone. I got multiple different games going. So it's a setup. It works for me. It's pretty cozy. And now the bathroom breaks are easy because we break every 15 minutes. You get a 3-minute break, but at the bottom of the hour, that's radio parlance for 30. Because the clock points at the bottom, see. At the bottom of the hour, we get the fantasy fix with Jeremy Hilber. I'm Jeremy Hilber. And he or Dan Lang. And they'll get basically a 3-minute kind of rundown of stats, not reacting to anything live. On top of that, we get another 3-minute break. And that's when I go stretch my legs, go get a cup of coffee, go get more water, go take a leak. I'm not like Scott Hansen.
I don't buy that whole nonsense.
I don't
go to the bathroom. Like, why? There's plenty of time you're watching Red Zone, and I have it on down here while I do the Sirius show, where they're just watching 30 seconds of a game, then they just split, go to another game. You can absolutely go somewhere. Like, nobody's holding you to the desk.
I know he throws to the games, but like, would anybody notice if like they just went to a different game and Hansen didn't throw to it just because he was in the bathroom? So yeah, I don't know if I buy that, but he seems pretty genuine about it. No, I take a leak about 15 times a game day show, by the way, because I have multiple hydro flasks in rotation. I have my cup of coffee. No, I am a serial pisser during the game day show, and I need those breaks. I will say this though. I love and respect what Scott Hansen does. I definitely talk way more on a Sunday than he does.
Yeah, no question about it. And you've been doing that a long time. Your former co-host Matt Camp, shout out to him. He's working for the WWE now. The guy's big time. Holy smokes, good for him.
And look, this is year 13 of the game day show. Like, we started it in 2010. It was 4 hours at the start, and then it went to 6. And it's been 6 ever since. And let me tell you, after Matt left, Matt and I had a relationship. That was just entirely based on chemistry, because Matt and I didn't know each other before we worked for John Hansen at Fantasy Guru, but then we just got to know each other. We hung out, we got each other's personalities. Like, we would bounce things off of each other and kind of know how the other one would react. And I have that with Paul. Like, Paul Kelly is like the pro of pros. And we make noises and we just like laugh about it's. So when you talk for 6 hours to somebody constantly, I mean, when's the last time you talked to your wife for 6 hours straight?
2001. By the last time I talked to her at all, but no, I'm always stuck in my basement doing podcasts for America.
Yeah, and so I mean, the last time I talked to my wife for 6 hours straight would be like when we were on vacation, we were in Punta Cana, or when we were on like a road trip, like driving from where we live in South Carolina to where we're from in Philadelphia area.
And then Joe, and I met your wife, very lovely woman. She's like, Joe, just stop talk. Just let me look.
We put on our true crime podcast, like, and that's interesting. So we don't have to talk to each other. No, but yeah, now that I mentioned that, having a 6-hour conversation with somebody every week, that's kind of a lot.
I love Paul Kelly. He is a pro's pro. I love that, man. He's an old radio guy after my own heart. So big shout out to Paul. Well, you guys are here to talk fantasy football, and it's week 11. I wanted to have some fun with Joe. So I was thinking, what kind of topics can we bring up and how can we relay it in a interesting fashion? So I said, you know what? I want to play fantasy fact or fiction with Mr. Dolan, where we kind of lay the scene for week 11 and we say, is this fact or is it fiction? And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discord in between. But let's open things up with the tight end position, because it's near and dear to my heart as a Dallas Goedert owner in many leagues.
Oh God. By the way, what a consequential play that was.
Unbelievable. And the fact that you can't review that, hopefully in the future that changes. But I mean, we could go on a whole rant about the whole show.
I kind of get the pass interference thing. Like, there's going to be pass interference calls where it is blatantly obvious. And then there's going to be ones where, the review didn't fix anything for me. Like the reviewing pass interference when that experiment, it was a failed experiment because it didn't fix anything for me. A face mask is cut and dry. They eliminated the 5-yard face mask, made them all 15 to take out some of the subjectivity. Like, now it is objective. If a face mask penalty occurs, it's a 15-yard penalty. That probably should be reviewable. But I mean, it just so happens that it was just one of the biggest disaster plays, and the refs missing the call just added insult to injury there.
The porn bots are joining the YouTube chat room, so they must be looking for help on the waiver wire too.
Well, that's what I'm. They're after me, Drake. I'm used to the porn bot spamming me. So
they follow him. They slide in the DMs at FG_Dolan.
I am the porn piper. So that's the majority of my comments as well, except for the people who tell me I have angry eyebrows.
Yeah, F those guys. But
Yeah.
tight end's a wasteland. Sunday, we lost 2 top 5 options with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert going down to IR. So Ertz, he's done for the season. Goddard, he's placed on IR Wednesday. He can come back as soon as week 15, which also is the first week of the fantasy football playoffs. Now, it's hard to find guys at this position who have a pulse, let alone double-digit PPR points like these two guys did. So me, like many of you guys, I'm going to the waiver wire now, and there's a few names out there that might be able to bring salvation. It's sort of interesting. So I'm going to start by asking you this, Joe. Fact or fiction? Can waiver wire options like Greg Dulcich, Trey McBride, and Foster Moreau fill the voids left by Ertz and Goddard?
Fact. The question is, how much can they fill the void? They can be adequate replacements. The thing about McBride is I'm not sure how big a role he'll have given Hollywood Brown is coming off of IR. He could play as soon as this week. And Rondale Moore is really starting to emerge as a solid slot option for the Cardinals. So that one's a fact. The Raiders offense just stinks in general. I think Moreau is probably my favorite of this group. No, Dulcich is my favorite of the group. I'm going to say that kid's name right one of these days because Dulcich, I don't think it's Dulcich. I think it's Dulcich.
Dulcich, yeah.
Yeah. I think he's my favorite of the group. Wilson just missed him on a 60-yard touchdown, but there's warts there too. That offense stinks and Russell Wilson stinks.
It's terrible.
Derek Carr, Moreau is probably my favorite of the group, but what I feel like this is going to be, it's going to be annoying, like Tyler Conklin being the tight end 3 through 3 weeks and then disappearing. Tyler Higbee looking like mini Mark Andrews for 5 weeks and then becoming a glorified offensive tackle, which I think Tyler Higbee is probably going to be again with more offensive line injuries for the Browns. So I think it's fact that these guys can fill in. I don't think it's fact that they're going to be Ertz and Goddard. And I just don't think that's the case.
I actually had the luxury in a few leagues where I snagged Moreau and McBride. I think in the casual fantasy league out there, Trey McBride, and I should look this up right now as we're on the air. I think the casual fantasy league, these guys want to see it. They're not going to go out and say, hey, I Trey McBride, yeah, I saw him play at the Senior Bowl, and I'm going to pick this guy up. Like they want someone who is, they know the name, and he's still only 2.6% rostered, Trey McBride. I bet if you played in NFFC, high stakes leagues, he's probably owned now in 100% of those leagues.
Well, here's the bad news. In my, I'm in second place in one of my NFFC dynasty leagues. It's a best ball dynasty. Obviously, if it's FFPC rather, which is tight end premium. Mm-hmm. The bad news is my top tight end is Dallas Goedert. The good news is I drafted Trey McBride and Greg Dulcich. So I drafted them. I didn't pick them up off the waiver wire. So I think I have a decent fill in there. But anyway, back to your point though, like in super competitive leagues, those guys are rostered. I'm going to see if McBride's available in my 14-team league where I just don't trust Tyler Higbee right now following Alaric Jackson going on IR.
You know what though? I dig Tyler Higbee, and I was a guy who was playing him a lot earlier in the season, and now they're down Cooper Kupp. They need a reliable option. I'm kind of in the camp of why can't Tyler Higbee just become the de facto option in this offense? I know they just lost some linemen. Maybe they just have him running short routes, but I mean, who else are you going to throw the ball to? Ben Skoranek, Van Jefferson? I don't think he commands targets out there. I think there's a shot for Higbee.
Yeah, I would hope so. I'm probably going to start him over McBride this week. The problem is just like these games where he's been a blocker and they lost to Alaric Jackson, who was their right guard, then moved to left tackle when Joe Noteboom got hurt and is now out again. I think there's a chance he continues that, but I would hope Matthew Stafford's like, well, I got to throw to somebody I know can catch the ball, and that's Tyler Higbee.
There's a guy that we're going to talk about his offense a little later on, but also, folks, don't forget, if you could get him on the cheap right now, David Njoku was having a career year. He's going to get Deshaun Watson coming back. Whoever is rostering him, I'm sure, has found another option at this point. I wouldn't be opposed to going out and getting him. All right, how about, let's see, stashing running backs. Now, it's always been a fun hobby of mine. So most bench you'll look at on any of my phones, I'll pull it up. It's loaded with lottery tickets, Joe. These are players who I dream on some rainy day they're going to get the call and become fantasy gold. Well, the rainy day might have a few pots of gold at the end of its rainbow for guys like Rachaad White in Tampa, Isiah Pacheco of the Chiefs, and Jaylen Warren in Pittsburgh, because they all have real opportunities right now to claim lead roles in their backfield. So we can go case by cases and look at the bigger picture. But the question is, fact or fiction? Warren, Pacheco, and White are ready to contribute as fantasy starters in our lineups as soon as week 11.
Fact. Well, not White because he's on
not
bye
White.
this
He's on
week.
bye.
Pacheco's got a great matchup this week against the Chargers, a run defense that's just been hemorrhaging fantasy points. I made a little prediction on the Fantasy Feast podcast with Ross Tucker that it's the first 100-yard game for Isiah Pacheco this week. Now, the thing that you got to be careful with, though, with Pacheco is he's been a 0 in the passing game, and he hasn't scored since week 1. So he got a lot of carries, but they're not those calorie-rich carries that you really want. And Jerick McKinnon is the guy who got the targets. And I thought it was an incredible irony that I thought Najee Harris looked like a professional running back with some burst for the first time all year this past week against the Saints, and Jaylen Warren outscored him for fantasy because Najee Harris, which is uncommon for him, didn't catch a pass in that game. I think Warren's probably more of a flex. That's always a cop-out, I know, like, oh, he's a flex. Yeah, well, you know, in a week where so many good players are on bye, he might need to be an RB1 for all I know. You know, you could have Travis Etienne and Jeff Wilson on your team, and you're throwing out Jaylen Warren as an RB1. But I think he's probably more of a I think Pacheco is probably in that area too. White's the guy I'm more excited about. Although I do still think White could be like a glorified Pacheco in that he gets the early down work, but they still trust Leonard Fournette on third downs. But Greg Allman told our guy Edwin Porras, FB Injury Doc on Twitter, that he just flat out thinks Rachaad White's going to start, and the flow of the game will dictate on which running back produces more. So I think the changing of the guard happened there.
Yeah, with Rachaad White, too, you got to also look with Leonard Fournette as his running mate. They extended Leonard Fournette. Brady trusts him. That's a big deal. Brady likes him in pass pro. Brady likes using him as a safety valve. So it really wasn't until Fournette went down that we saw the emergence of White. But White looks way better. Let's all be honest here. Fournette did get in the end zone. So I agree with you. I think he's still going to have that role. And if he can play, you know, if they're splitting the snaps 50-50 and he's going to get the goal line work, he's still viable. You can still plug him in your lineups for fantasy because who else are you going to play at running back these days? Jeez Louise. Yeah.
All these guys are viable. I mean, they're guys getting touches at the running back position. In week 11 of an NFL season, that's a viable fantasy option.
We throw in a question from the chat here. A stepmom asks, would you stash Hilliard over the KC defense rest of season? So obviously, Hilliard being the backup to Derrick Henry in Tennessee versus a defense. You know, it's Kansas City defense. They never really set the world on fire, but they do what we want from a fantasy defense. They play in games that are going to force a lot of dropbacks, which means interceptions, sacks, forced fumbles, etc. But for me, yeah, I'm picking up the stash running back because if Derrick Henry goes down again, now you're cooking with gas.
Yeah, I'm not yet at the point where I'm willing to carry a second defense. That usually comes around week 14, where I'll make the gamble that one of the guys who I know is going to be in my championship lineup isn't going to get hurt. And I'll carry a second defense then and play matchups. Not right now, though. I'll hold on to Hilliard.
The guest today is Joe Dolan. FantasyPoints.com is where you find him. He does a great daily podcast over on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. I actually watched it this morning while I was driving into work and hosts SiriusXM.
Wait a minute, you were driving and watching at the same time?
Yeah, I do everything.
I would not advise that, Drake.
Yeah, I'm tweeting. That's why I paid for the check mark like a loser, because I screw up so many tweets while I drive that I'm like, oh my God, I got to go back and fix this. And I left a word out or it just sounds dumb. So I paid Elon the $8 and I got the editing feature. So
good for you. Congratulations.
Yes. And, I got that check mark, me and the counselor.
Are you are you preparing for the snowstorm? Are you in the eye of the storm there for this weekend?
I live in Syracuse, so we're just down Route 90 from Buffalo. So they say, hey, you're going to get 2-3 feet of snow. Like, people that live upstate New York, that doesn't matter. Okay, great. I got a snowblower. Like, let me know.
Oh my God.
It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't change. I golfed last week. Next week I'll be using the snowblower. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, we're so ready for it up here.
Anyway, I mean, yeah, I was just wondering. We got one snowstorm last year, and I was like, all right, that's enough. I live in South Carolina, so like we got like
hate the snow. I hate it.
You live in Syracuse, man.
Now,
why do you live in Syracuse if you hate the snow?
I guess I was too much of a college basketball fan. I had to be close to it, but our team sucks now. We just lost to Colgate for the second straight year.
Hey, my Nittany Lions, hey, big win over Butler.
Look at you guys.
Yeah, 3-0, man. How about that?
We're both lacrosse schools now.
Oh, I guess we have a good lacrosse program too. We're a wrestling school.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. My school, I went to Oswego State University. We were a big hockey, and all my fraternity brothers were these wrestling guys. So a little pipsqueak like me could walk into the bar and push guys around, and have the big jack dude behind me take care of my business.
I'm very happy for you. That's a nice thing to have. Somebody who has your back at all times.
Yeah. So somebody who has Aaron Rodgers back now is Christian Watson. He's the waiver wire darling of the week, and he blew up in week 10 with a PPR wide receiver 3 finish, 32.7 points, thanks to a stat line of 10 receptions for 193 and 3. He was a real life high draft pick in the NFL draft too. He was the second pick of the second round last year. So he's been underwhelming for the Packers this year, but who hasn't been? They've all been terrible. Now, I'm not 100% sold, Joe, that he's a polished route runner. Cheap plug for your site here. I recall Greg Cosell saying on the Fantasy Points live stream last week, which, by the way, for anybody is a must listen.
Yeah,
you got to listen to I'll listen to Cosell read a phone book.
I think it's the best football show out there. Like with John bouncing things off, Greg and John making fun of Kaplan giving his information, and Greg talking football. I think it's perfect. Absolutely.
Cosell said Watson is kind of a one-trick pony, but that trick is pretty valuable to guys like us who are just hoping he takes 9 routes to the house. Yeah. So if he's going to play 84% or more of the routes like he did on Sunday, we've got reason to be excited. So my question to you, and we'll lump in these other waiver wire worthy wideouts, fact or fiction, guys like Watson, Kadarius Toney, and Parris Campbell are league winners and can be slotted into our fantasy lineups immediately.
I think Watson is going to be inconsistent.
Yep.
I think the guy with the most league winning potential here is Toney, just because of the offense that he plays in, and the situation he's at. That, by the way, the Chiefs had 3 receivers out of practice today. They said Mecole Hardman has an illness in his abdomen, which sounds like appendicitis, but I just hope it's not worse than that. Juju obviously had the concussion, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling had the illness. I think Watson's going to be inconsistent. I think he has got a guy, Drake, and I'm always leery of these guys for fantasy weekly purposes. I'm leery of guys who I think need to score a touchdown to come through for fantasy. And I think Watson needs to score a touchdown. Because, look, he caught 4 passes and scored 3 times, okay? If Christian Watson doesn't score a touchdown, what's his fantasy upside? He's not going to go for 8 for 148 like a Cooper Kupp might and not score a touchdown. I just don't think he's that kind of player right now. I don't know if he'll ever be that kind of player. Maybe he will. But Cosell said he is a one-trick pony. He literally compared him to Marquez Valdes-Scantling before the draft. And we know how frustrating he was. So here it is. Christian Watson could be a league winner depending on what week you use him in your lineup. Because I think he could be a league loser otherwise. Parris Campbell, I think with Matt Ryan out, I think he's like kind of a solid wide receiver 2 now. And I was annoyed by it early in the season because I wanted Pittman and Alec Pierce to get their targets. But, he's going up against an Eagle defense that lost Avonte Maddox last week. He's on IR now. I think he's more of like the middle of the road guy. I think Toney's the guy who's got the ceiling and the floor. I think Toney's got the ceiling and the floor. I think Campbell's got the floor. I think Watson's got only the ceiling. I don't think he has a floor. So Toney is the guy of this group that I think, man, they called on him and he delivered in a big spot. Oh boy, they traded good picks for him. So I think Toney's the guy I would classify the most as the league winner. So this is, in true Dolan fashion, a wishy-washy true or fact or fiction, because I think there's fact and there's fiction here.
I tell you, if I was playing DFS this week and Christian Watson looks to be healthy and return for the Titans who play the Packers this week, I would play Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is going to catch no ownership. Everybody and their brother is going to be like, oh, I love Christian Watson right now. Christian Watson's going to go 3 for 38 and not score. And Allen Lazard's going to catch 8 balls and score a touchdown. Like, that's how fantasy football goes. You remember a week or so ago, everyone's like, Terrace Marshall, he's getting all the work for the Panthers now. And then, Terrace Marshall dies. And we never hear from him again.
Well, so the problem with Terrace Marshall is quarterback play. At the very least, there's still the husk of Aaron Rodgers out there for Christian Watson, right? We still have that.
And he should have scored week 1 on the very first play of the season. They took a shot to him. He just dropped it.
I said that to Ross today on the Fantasy Feast, and I was like, do you remember they took him in the top 35 of the draft? And literally on their first drive of the season, they called up imagine he catches that ball. How differently are we that game might, their season might be different if he catches that football.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they put some faith in him, and he responded against Dallas this past week.
So we'll see. Hey, if it's tough week 11 to find fantasy relevant guys out there, and they have so many of these guys pop up on our waiver wire. It's fun. This is what makes hustling and what we talk about here on the program all the time, using your waiver wire money smartly. I'm never one of these guys, Joe, that says like, week 1, I'm going to spend all of it on the first guy. Like, I'm cheap. My father put that in me. It's in my blood. My wife could tell you 1,000 stories. Like, I do not like to get rid of a dollar. So I like to finish the season, and I always have some money left over because all of a sudden, oh, hey, here's, Christian Watson. Like this caller this viewer in our YouTube chat just asked, hey, what if Hilliard becomes the guy next week? You know how much fab people would be throwing at Dontrell Hilliard if Derrick Henry went down for the season? It'd be unbelievable. And all of a sudden you're out of money because you spent it all week 1. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm the opposite of that. I'm not a blow it all week 1 kind of guy, but I always tell people like if I get a question in week 11, hey, how much fab should I put on Christian Watson? A hell of a lot of it, because the value of that dollar depreciates. A fab dollar, there's going to be fewer opportunities to use it. Now, I think maybe depreciates the wrong word, because if you have more and the opportunity comes along to pick up a hammer handcuff, then your dollars are going to mean a lot. But the question is, what hole are you in because you haven't spent your money? I'm more in the camp of, by week 8, all right, like, I'm not penny pinching with my fab money if I need help, especially with buys coming up. So I'm a little bit on the opposite side of that, Drake. I got to tell you, like, okay. somebody asked me like, what was it? Like, oh, I have Kyler Murray in a super flex. I'm 5-5. How much money should I put on Colt McCoy? All of it. Like like there's no other quarterbacks out there. Like you gotta stay afloat. So that's more my school of thought. Although it is case by case, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I've still got a little money left in the Scott Fish Bowl, where I am 25th overall. Humble brag.
Hey, look at you, kid.
Yeah. I want to get the Scott Fish Bowl belt and the King's Classic belt, which I'm currently also in first place. And I would just drape them over my shoulders here while I do every podcast and be the most obnoxious person on Twitter.
I don't know if you can see back there over my shoulder. Those are
you won the Flex League.
Those
right?
are that's a double. That's two Flex League belts, and I am currently in second place this year. So I'm going for the trifecta. The only person who has more than 2 is Jake Seeley, and he's been in like 400 of the things. So I'm coming for him. Let's put it that way.
It's so fun. That's why people need to have great prizes and trophies for their fantasy leagues. We've had guys, they brought the trophy to my wedding, and guys wear the belts everywhere. You can wear them to funerals. You can wear it to a wedding. It doesn't matter. It's all in good fun. Well, one place you might not want to bring it because if you drop it on his foot, he'll be out for 2 years, is to Motown around DeAndre Swift.
Oh.
We know Swift is super talented. That's not up for debate, but he's also incredibly frail. Incredible stat I read today. Wednesday's full practice by DeAndre Swift was only the 3rd time all year he's worked full on a Wednesday. So that's good, I guess, but the Lions on game day don't have a plan for Mr. Glass. His snaps over the last 3 weeks, they're all over the place. 31, 16, 54. So his touch count, it looks like a backup. Joe. He's not even getting receiving work, which we thought he was great at. He's got 4 receptions the past 2 weeks. Thank God he scored a touchdown because it was still an 8-point week for him, and he finished as RB 30. So with trade deadlines looming, I want to know, are you buying or selling DeAndre Swift for the remainder of 22?
No, I'm doing neither, because if I sell him, I'm not getting anything. And if I'm buying him, what am I giving up? Like, I think it's just one of those things where you got to play the matchups and hope that he just gets in the end zone, because you're right. I mean, if he was at the very least getting targets, if he was playing a James White kind of role, I could at least say, well, the Lions have been pretty much an over team for a lot of this year. This is a projected high scoring game. He might not get 10 carries, but he sure could get 8 checkdowns. But now they have Justin Jackson in that mix. One of my rules of thumb for fantasy is we can do 2-man rotations. Okay. Like, the days of the bell cow are probably over. We can handle 2-man rotations in fantasy. You throw a third guy in there on a bad team, then we're in trouble. And I think that's where we're at with Justin Jackson now, with Jamal Williams, and with DeAndre Swift. And my question now is, long-term, do they essentially concede that he's never going to be a 275 touch guy?
Oh, they have to.
I think that's possible.
Sure.
And we're going to reckon with that, but I'm wondering where he's going to get drafted next year. And I think that's going to be their plan, to say, no, he's a 125 carry, 70 target kind of guy. That is what he is. That's valuable to us, but he's just never going to be the bell cow that maybe people wanted him to be. And they can still have value to that. I think that's going to be the Lions' plan this offseason, Brian. I really do. I think whether they bring back Jamal Williams or draft it back, I think that's what they're going to do.
And you could also talk about a committee with 3 guys in Kansas City. CEH now, I'm stealing this right from Graham Barfield's stat pack article at fantasypoints.com. His snap rate has fallen 6 straight games when it peaked in week 4. The last 3 weeks, 27%, 17%, 6%. I can't, in super deep leagues like the Kings Classic, 14 teams with 3 flexes, I can't bring myself to drop him, because I'm just like, they'll find a way. All of a sudden, Andy will put him out there and he'll have a week with 15 touches. Like, the offense is too good to not have that little piece of it, even if he never plays again.
And Jerick McKinnon's always hurt. So that's it. Now, did you see it, interestingly, that they put in a claim for Eno Benjamin?
Yep.
So that really does say to me that they're done with Edwards-Helaire, but maybe he's just a guy. Maybe he becomes I think this is in the low end range of outcomes. Maybe he becomes a guy like Darius Slayton, has to play out of necessity and ends up working himself back into a productive role. But I think
I totally agree with that. And that's why I'm not dropping him this year.
Yeah,
he's going to be in, I'm making a prediction. CEH is in lineups fantasy championship weekend because something happens to Pacheco or McKinnon and he's playing a pivotal role, and people are going to kill themselves when they realize, oh my God, I dropped CEH.
That's a brave prediction. But right, if McKinnon's hurt, they're going to have to throw him out there. I mean, they can't not do it. So, yeah, I'm with you. Like, if I have 5 bench spots, I'm dropping them. But if I have 8, I'm like, who am I picking up? Zach Moss? Like,
yeah,
like, all right, I'd rather have a bad player in a great offense than a bad player in a bad one. So, yeah, I'm with you there. It's just, I think it's over for him. I think they just trust Pacheco more, and then they trust McKinnon in the passing game. That's the biggest thing. Now, Graham also has postulated, because everybody loves to dump on CEH, and I think it's justifiable. Especially the Arby's don't matter bros. Oh my God, do they love pointing that out? But Graham does also think injuries have really played a part here.
Yes.
And remember, he had that really nasty leg injury. What was it? He had a spleen issue last year, and apparently was in the hospital, and he lost all this weight, and maybe he's just never been able to get healthy.
That's a good point. And you mentioned Eno Benjamin, and the Arizona Cardinals will never be confused for a well-run organization.
No.
So this week they waived 23-year-old running back Eno Benjamin. Head coach Cliff Kingsbury said this week, quote, "What I've seen is if you really want to be on the field, you earn the time and prove to your coaches you deserve to be out there." Okay. I mean, he was literally just your lead back for 3 games while James Conner was out. And in a limited role per PFF, ranked 15th in missed tackles forced. So not surprisingly, the first team in the waiver order, the Houston Texans, scooped up Benjamin, and now he'll slot in behind Dameon Pierce. So fact or fiction, Benjamin's addition to the to the Texans backfield is bad news for Dameon Pierce, who is RB15 on the season.
Complete fiction. And I think there's something behind the scenes that now that doesn't mean this change of scenery can't help Eno Benjamin, but do you remember earlier this offseason, I think it was the offseason, I think it was August, when people were like figuring, oh, should I draft Darrell Williams or should I draft Eno Benjamin as the handcuff in best ball as the handcuff to James Conner? And I think Cliff Kingsbury says something, I've been really impressed with Eno Benjamin's maturity. He's really like grown. He's taken a step forward. That to me suggested he wasn't mature his first couple seasons. And the fact that they just cut him in week 10 or week 11 suggests maybe he fell back on old habits. So I'm not sure how much maybe the change of scenery helps, but I do not believe him to be a threat to Dameon Pierce. Could he get 6 touches here and there? Sure. But no, I don't believe him to be a threat to Dameon Pierce at all. I don't even consider him like a priority waiver ad.
If you're looking for a handcuff though, super deep league, you never know.
Yeah, he might be better than Rex Burkhead in that regard. I think Burkhead might be dusty. So I would think he's better than that. Pierce is an angry runner, so he might get hurt. He's never had this kind of workload before, which has been really a bone of contention for Florida Gator fans who are like, John Hansen tweeted about it, and he's like, I don't know how this guy didn't get, and all the Gator fans were like, our idiot coach, but maybe he wears down. Yeah, I mean, I just think there's probably something to that his attitude or something off the field contributed to his being released.
I got to ask you about our Eagles here. I'm a fan. You used to live in the area. I believe you worked for the website.
2008.
So Jalen Hurts, he's simply not running anymore. No one's talking about this. He doesn't have a game in double-digit carries since week 5, and he hasn't topped 30 yards rushing since that same game. Once in a while, he'll get one of these little 1-yard sneaks at the goal line, so people kind of forget about it. But why do you think the Birds have gotten away from Jalen Hurts as a runner?
Okay. Number one, so if you go with double digits, I think usually that's a nice, easy thing. I do it too. Like, he hasn't reached 10 fantasy points since X. He does have 9 carries in 2 of his last 4 games.
Never let facts get in the way of a good story.
Okay, so I mean that's a lot for a quarterback. Here's the other thing. Against Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, I mean, he threw 4 touchdown passes. Like, why would he be running in that game? He was picking them apart through the air. And then if you want to make an excuse for this game, I even think Eagle fans have been pretty level-headed about this outside of what they want to do to poor Jonathan Gannon. The Eagles were a team the first 9 weeks of the season who had virtually every bounce go their way. Now, what's the old adage? Luck is the product of hard work or whatever.
Something like that.
Something like that. I'm bastardizing it, but something like that. The Eagles are really good, so you can say they've created their own luck. Every single bounce possible went against them in week 10. And in hilarious or depressing fashion, depending on which side you look at it. Quez Watkins falling down on what should have been a walk-in touchdown and then immediately fumbling. Dallas Goedert getting his head ripped off. It wasn't called, and he fumbles, changes the game. The Commanders are averaging 3 yards per rush attempt, but for some reason, the Eagles can't get off the field on third down. They just had everything go against them in a very weird game. I would say Jalen Hurts' performance against the Commanders was simply a game flow and a volume thing. I think they ran like 48 plays in that game. That one I just think is probably something that you might argue with Justin Fields and his rushing being unsustainable. Jalen Hurts' legs are a foundational part of what the Eagles do, but they ideally don't want him taking 15 hits a game. They probably don't want that. Now, on any given week, can that happen? Yes, but I think ultimately, Jeffrey Lurie from the top down, the Philadelphia Eagles we are a passing the football organization, and Jalen Hurts has progressed extremely well as a passer. And I just think that's the root of it.
Yeah, no question. So fact or fiction, the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl.
Fact.
Yeah, there it is.
And I will be there. That's a pact my wife and I have. We did not
Oh,
go.
that's cool.
We did not go in 2017. I've been to the Super Bowl, but not when the Eagles were in it. So
And you get the Waste Management Open that same weekend in Phoenix.
Oh my God. The Wasted Management Open. Oh, now that's wait till I tell her as soon as I get off here. We love that tournament. Oh man.
Wait, the grinder, Tom Brawley might show up for that one.
Oh yeah. Well, hey there, Joe. We're gonna like, yo, hey, our new Sirius XM colleague.
Yes, I messaged him. If you guys didn't hear it, so Tom Brawley, who does the Waiver Wire show with Joe every Tuesday morning, they put the pod out. He writes for fantasypoints.com. He had his debut on Tuesday morning, I believe, with Paul Kelly. John Hanson was on vacation. He was in LA for a couple days. So they had Tom on. In like the fourth segment of the show, Paul Kelly's mic drops in the break. And now Tom is a rookie at hosting. He's never been on national radio like this before. And now all of a sudden they're like, hey, by the way, the producer's in his ear. Paul's not here. You got to host the show by yourself.
Yeah.
I do a show by myself. I get scared. You know, so he did a good job.
Shows on Sirius XM, okay? Like pretty close to it. Yeah. That's not a moment you're ever comfortable for. Even when like John gave Tom a tip. He said, always keep the number handy because you could just keep repeating the number and get people to call in. And so that's an easy way. 888 XM Fantasy, 888-963-2682.
Yeah. The funny thing with him is people will actually call the morning show. Try getting people to call you at 8:00 at night on a Sunday after they've been drinking for 38 hours. It's slightly different, but I'll get you out of here with this last one here. Actually, no, screw that. I was going to ask you about Deshaun Watson, but let's hit some of these questions here people are waiting patiently here. Question for you. PPR, Christian Watson over Deontay Johnson this week.
I would do that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. Bands Santana. You're a big music guy. That could be a whole nother podcast. Debo for Najee Harris and Goddard. Goddard again hurt, not coming back to week 15. So Debo for two banged up players.
And Debo hasn't really been producing. This is kind of a skanky trade. I still like the Debo side. I'd rather pick up a tight end off the waiver wire. Yeah.
Moke, maybe short for Jamoke, asks, hey guys, would you trade JT, must mean Jonathan Taylor and Lockett for Kenneth Walker and Tony Pollard?
I like the Walker.
I mean, I don't know about your roster.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's something that if you're strong at wide receiver, I would make this trade. I want the Walker and Pollard side.
Me too. All right. Jelly of the Month asks, PPR, Jacoby Myers or Kadarius Toney?
Well, who covers Jacoby Myers will be Michael Carter because Jacoby Myers plays the slot and Sauce Gardner doesn't move into the slot. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say Toney, by the way. I'm still going to say Toney in this week. Especially, let's just say if Juju and Mecole Hardman don't play, go with Toney.
Yeah. All right. Parker Warren asks, is this a good trade? Kirk and Stevenson, I give for Nick Chubb. So he's getting Nick Chubb, and he's giving away Christian Kirk, who's a top 15 wide receiver, top 10, and Ramondre Stevenson.
No, it's not. Then Nick Chubb's going on bye next week, correct? Oh, yeah, they were on bye. They were just on bye. No, I still don't like it. I think Ramondre Stevenson's a bell cow.
Would you accept Mixon and McLaurin for Eckler?
I want to be on the.
I want to be on the Mixon and McLaurin side. I think.
Yeah, I normally hate the 2-for-1 because normally it's getting two mediocre players for one really good one. But you can make an argument Mixon and Eckler are comparable at this point, and then you're getting McLaurin, who's gotten some life with Heineke. Yeah, I kind of like the Mixon and Terry side here.
You've got more chances with Mixon and McLaurin to blow up where you only have the one option with Eckler. All right, one more here. We'll get Joe out of here. Should I trade Zeke? The answer probably is always yes. And Geno or Russ for Justin Fields?
Yes. I mean, Zeke's a low RB2 for me, touchdown dependent. He's not doing anything in the passing game. And Justin Fields could be the QB1 right now. So, yeah, I would make that trade.
I know you're starving, Joe, so I appreciate the few minutes here. Thanks so much for coming on The Hustle. You can find Joe over at fantasypoints.com. Follow him on Twitter at FG_Dolan. Again, check him out Sundays from 1 to 7 on the SiriusXM Game Day Show with my main man, Paul Kelly. So thanks, Joe. Great time. Appreciate it, brother.
You got it, Drake. I had a great time.
All right, and everybody out there, good luck setting your lineups this week. Find me 7 to 9 on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. And remember to never get out hustled. See you, folks.